I still remember the sound of laughter. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my daughter's either. It was everyone else's, echoing around the living room like a song we weren't invited to sing. My name is Emma Clarke. I'm 33, a single mother, and for the longest time, I believed family meant forgiveness. That day, at my nephew's birthday, I learned it sometimes means humiliation dressed as love. Before I continue my story, tell me this. If someone disrespected your child in front of everyone, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or walk away to protect their dignity? Share your honest opinion in the comments. I truly want to hear your perspective. Lily, my little girl, had worn her favorite yellow dress, the one with the white lace at the collar. She'd spent all morning helping me wrap the toy we'd picked out for her cousin. She was 7, too young to understand hierarchy, too kind to expect cruelty. When my mother, her grandmother, cut the cake, Lily clapped with the kind of joy only children have. And then she waited, patiently, politely, until every other child had a slice, until every adult had one too. But when the knife reached the last piece, my mother turned, smiled that sharp, practiced smile, and said, "She shouldn't be here. She's not family." The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. Lily's small hands trembled, her eyes wide and searching, turned to me as if to ask, "Why?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just took her hand and walked out. No raised voice, no scene. Just the sound of her quiet sobs against my shoulder as we stepped into the cold air outside. That night, I lay awake beside her, watching her breathe, trying to understand how love could turn into something so cruelly selective. The next morning, my phone rang. My mother's voice on the other end, soft, trembling. "Emma, please don't do this. You know how people talk. Don't ruin the family over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That's what she called it. But it wasn't misunderstanding that kept my daughter from eating cake. It was disrespect. It was history. And it was time. Time to stop pretending kindness could fix what cruelty had carved. Time to stop letting silence be mistaken for peace. That day broke something in me, and in breaking it revealed what had always been beneath. The truth. Here at Revenge Bible, we explore real psychological stories of betrayal and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional reckoning. Before that birthday, my life was quiet, predictable in a way that I used to find comforting. I worked as a customer service representative for a small insurance firm, answering phones, typing reports, listening to strangers complain about policies I didn't create, but somehow had to defend. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. It kept food on the table, and it gave Lily the stability I never had. Our mornings were our little rituals. Pancakes every Sunday, Lily's chatter filling the apartment as she told me about her dreams, sometimes about unicorns, sometimes about her dad, who she barely remembered. I'd smile, even when the ache of that absence tugged at the edges of my heart. For a long time, I believed that if I could just stay kind, stay calm, stay good, that everything would somehow balance itself out. That was what my mother taught me, or rather, what she demanded of me. Margaret Clarke wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. She didn't shout, she didn't hit. Her cruelty was quieter, polished, socially acceptable. It came in the form of reminders. "You know, Emma, Daniel has always been the responsible one. Maybe if you just listened, things would have turned out differently. Not everything's about you, dear." And I would nod, smile, swallow the sting, because I had grown up believing that silence was strength. My brother, Daniel, on the other hand, could do no wrong. The golden child, the son who stayed close to our mother, who called her every day, who inherited her charm and her sense of entitlement. While I was raising my daughter alone in a small apartment, Daniel was living in our late father's house, the one we were supposed to share. When Dad passed, the will was vague. It said, to be divided equally among my children. But my mother interpreted equally as Daniel first, Emma later. She told me it was for the best, that Daniel had a family to support, as if my daughter didn't count. Still, I visited. Still, I tried. Because family, I thought, wasn't about fairness. It was about loyalty. And I wanted Lily to know her grandparents. My mother adored being the center of gatherings. Her living room was always spotless, scented candles burning, soft jazz playing in the background, the perfect picture of grace. She liked to remind us how much she sacrificed to keep the family together after Dad died. I knew the truth. It wasn't about keeping us together. It was about keeping control. I used to wonder when exactly I became the outsider in her story. Maybe it was when I chose to raise Lily alone instead of staying in a loveless marriage. Maybe it was when I stopped apologizing for not needing her approval. But still, I stayed polite. I sent her flowers on her birthday. I made the drive to her house every holiday. I laughed at her jokes even when they carried little barbs hidden inside them. "You've gained some weight, haven't you?" she'd say, smiling. Or, "Lily is beautiful, but it's a shame she has her father's eyes." Each comment was a pebble in my pocket, small, ignorable, until the weight of them became impossible to carry. The day of the birthday party, I remember feeling hopeful, naively hopeful. Lily was excited, and I wanted her to have that moment, to be surrounded by cousins, balloons, laughter. I wanted her to see what family was supposed to feel like. I remember standing in the kitchen that morning, packing the gift. A remote control car Lily had chosen for her cousin. I tied the ribbon carefully, the way my mother used to do when I was little. There was something symbolic about it, like I was tying together two generations, hoping to mend what was fraying between us. The drag to my mother's house was quiet. Lily hummed softly in the back seat, legs swinging, unaware of the storm that was waiting for us. When we arrived, my mother greeted us with her usual air-kiss warmth, the kind that looks loving to everyone watching but feels cold up close. "Oh, Emma, you look tired. Still working those long hours." Then she turned to Lily with that tight smile. "There's my little guest." Guest, not granddaughter, not family. Guest. It should have been a warning, but I brushed it off. I told myself she didn't mean it, that she was just being her, formal, particular. I'd spent years giving her the benefit of the doubt, convincing myself she was better than she was. We spent the next hour making small talk. Daniel bragged about his new business venture. My mother listened, eyes glowing with pride. I stood by the window, half present, watching Lily play with the other kids. She was laughing then, before the cake, before everything changed. Sometimes I replay that morning in my mind and wonder if I miss something, a sign, a shift in tone, a crack in the illusion. But no, my mother's cruelty didn't announce itself. It waited until the moment it would hurt most, when my daughter was happiest. And that's what made it unforgettable.
There's a strange moment that happens before betrayal. The air gets still, like even the room is holding its breath. I didn't realize it then, but that quiet was the last second of peace before everything changed. The party had been going smoothly. The kids were gathered around the table, voices high with excitement. Lily stood near the edge, hands clasped in front of her, trying to be patient as the adults positioned the candles. She looked so proud of herself when she helped light one. My brother Daniel laughed and said, "Careful, Lily! Grandma's particular about her tablecloths." It was meant as a joke, but I saw the way my mother's lips twitched. Annoyance disguised as a smile. Then came the song, the familiar "Happy Birthday," a chorus of off-key voices and clapping hands. Lily sang louder than anyone. I remember thinking how beautiful her voice sounded, free, unguarded, unaware of cruelty. When the candles were blown out, my mother took charge of the cake. Of course she did. Everything in her house had to go her way, even the slicing of dessert. She moved with practiced elegance, her gold bracelet glinting under the light. One slice, then another. Plates passed around, smiles, compliments about the icing. She served Daniel first, always Daniel first, then his wife, their son, and the other guests. Piece by piece, the cake disappeared. Lily waited, her little hands folded neatly on the table, her eyes fixed on the knife as though it were a promise. I watched her patience with quiet pride. She had inherited that from me, the ability to wait her turn, to trust that fairness would find her. But fairness never came. When the knife reached the final slice, my mother paused. She looked at Lily, then at me. Her smile didn't waver, but her voice did something strange, light, dismissive, but sharp enough to cut through every sound in the room. "She shouldn't be here. She's not family." The words hit me before I even understood them. The laughter around us died instantly. A fork clinked against a plate. I remember the smell of frosting, the sound of the clock ticking, and Lily's face. Confusion first, then hurt, then something deeper, the kind of heartbreak that shouldn't exist in a child's eyes. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My throat felt locked. My mother didn't look sorry. She didn't even look at me. She just turned away, wiping the knife clean as though nothing had happened. Daniel cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. His wife whispered something to him. No one said a word to us. Not one. Lily's voice broke the silence. "But, Grandma, you said I was your special girl." My mother didn't answer. She just placed the knife down, smoothed her apron, and said, "That's enough, Lily. Go stand with your mother." I saw my daughter's lip tremble. She turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" That was the moment my heart cracked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw that cake across the room, but instead, I took a breath, a deep, shaking breath, and reached for her hand. I said quietly, "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. We're just leaving." And then I turned to the room, to the people I once called family, and I smiled. Not out of calmness, but out of survival. I said, "Thank you for having us." My voice didn't tremble, though my hands did. No one stopped me. No one even looked me in the eye. As we stepped out the door, the air felt colder than it should have. I remember the sound of Lily's shoes scuffing the pavement, her small hand clutching mine like she was holding on to safety itself. We reached the car. She cried the whole drive home, quiet tears, the kind that break you because they're too soft to be angry at. I kept my eyes on the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every word my mother had said, echoed in my head. She's not family. When we got home, Lily asked, "Are we still family, Mommy?" I pulled her close. I said, "Yes, we're each other's family, and that's enough." But that night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the dark and let myself feel everything I'd swallowed for years. The favoritism, the manipulation, the small humiliations that built into something I could no longer ignore. I replayed the scene again and again, hoping it would hurt less the next time. It didn't. When dawn came, I made coffee and stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. My face looked tired, but sharper somehow, like something had awakened. I realized I wasn't mourning a moment. I was mourning a lifetime of pretending my mother's love was unconditional. And that realization was the beginning of everything that followed. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Silence isn't peace. It's permission." And I knew as I closed that notebook that I was done being quiet.
Grief has a strange way of turning into clarity. The morning after the party, I felt something quiet inside me shift, like the air before a storm. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. "Please don't do this. Don't ruin the family." At first, I didn't know what this even meant, but the tone in her voice, pleading, trembling, told me something deeper was buried under her fear. It wasn't guilt. It was worry. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control. That's when I started to notice things. Small things that had always been there, but never made sense until now. The week after the party, I stopped by my brother's house to drop off Lily's forgotten sweater. His home, our late father's house, had been renovated. Fresh paint, new furniture, a shiny new car in the driveway. And yet Daniel had complained to me just months before about how tight things were. When I asked casually about the renovations, he smiled that same smirk he had since childhood. Smug, rehearsed. Mom helped out. Dad left her some funds in the estate to manage. You know how she is with details. Details. That word lingered. That night, I opened my old storage box, the one that still smelled faintly of my father's workshop. Inside were folders of his papers, old receipts, and a few yellowing letters. My father was meticulous. Every detail mattered to him. So when I found a handwritten note clipped to a draft of his will, my hands went cold. It read, "Both homes split evenly. Keep them equal. Emma will need security with the child. Daniel already has stability." But the official copy my mother had given us after the funeral only mentioned the house to be managed by Daniel under family advisement. The phrasing had always confused me. Now it enraged me. I stared at that note for hours, my mind racing. My mother hadn't misread my father's words. She had rewritten them. For years, she had kept control of everything, the finances, the documents, even our emotions. She didn't see it as lying. To her, it was maintaining order. Over the next few days, I began to connect dots. Daniel's business loans that never seemed to need repayment.
the way my mother always claimed to be handling taxes for the estate, the quiet exclusion of my name from anything financial. Every discovery burned, but it also clarified something. That humiliation at the birthday wasn't a slip. It was a symptom. My mother didn't see my daughter as family because she never truly saw me as family. I was an accessory to her legacy, not part of it. Still, I didn't want anger to be my only fuel. I needed proof. Calm, undeniable proof. So, one evening after work, I visited Mr. Bennett, the family attorney who'd handled my father's estate years ago. He was older now, glasses perched low on his nose, the kind of man who still believed in paper records. He looked up when I entered. "Emma Clarke, it's been a long time." I smiled faintly. "I was hoping you could help me with something, just to clear my mind." He listened as I explained, carefully, without emotion, that I suspected the will we received wasn't the original. His brow furrowed. Then he stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder. "This," he said, handing it to me, "is the version your father signed in my office. I'm obligated to keep a copy of every document I've notarized." The weight of the folder in my hands felt heavier than anything I'd carried in years. I opened it there in his office, heart pounding. And there it was, my father's handwriting, his signature, the same note I'd found at home, but this time attached to the final, signed document. Property to be divided equally between my children Emma and Daniel Clarke. I closed the folder slowly, my hands trembling. "Did my mother ever see this version?" He hesitated. "She requested a certified copy shortly after your father's death. I assumed she gave both of you one." She hadn't. Walking home that night, I felt the cold November air biting my cheeks. But beneath that chill was something steady, purpose. For the first time in years, my silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like strategy. Over the next week, I documented everything. I took photos of the letter, scanned the signed will, and stored backups on a drive. I began writing nightly in my journal again. Not just thoughts, but timelines, conversations, patterns. Each entry was a stitch in a larger truth. This wasn't about a single cruel remark at a party. It was about power, and how my mother had used it to make me feel small enough to accept injustice as love. I watched Lily sleep one night, her little hand curled around her toy bunny, and I promised her, quietly, in the dark, that I'd never let anyone make her feel unworthy again. That promise became my compass. From then on, I wasn't just Emma, the quiet daughter. I was Emma, the witness, the one collecting truth. And the truth once gathered demands to be seen.
When you have spent years being ignored, people stop paying attention to your silence. That was my greatest advantage. In the days following the discovery of my father's real will, I slipped back into my mother's orbit with the same composure she'd always expected. I still answered her calls. I still smiled politely when she mentioned Daniel's progress. But beneath that calm exterior, every word I spoke was measured, every encounter rehearsed. I knew confronting her outright would fail. Narcissists don't break when you shout. They break when the mask they wear is stripped away in front of witnesses. So,
I planned something she couldn't ignore, something poetic, something that would expose her and Daniel together, using their own words and their own need for control. My father's upcoming memorial anniversary offered the perfect stage. It had been 5 years since his passing, and my mother insisted on hosting a modest remembrance dinner. In her mind, it would be an opportunity to reinforce the image of a grateful family. In mind, it would be the night that illusion unraveled. But I couldn't rush. I needed to ensure everything was airtight, legally, emotionally, narratively. I started by visiting Mr. Bennet again. I asked him to notarize the verified will and send official certified copies to both me and the probate office. Then I asked a simple question. Would it be possible to read this version aloud should it ever come into dispute? He looked up, recognizing something resolute in my tone. He said, "If you have witnesses and reasonable cause, yes, but you'll only get one chance. Make sure it counts." I smiled. "Oh, it will." Next, I reached out to a few old family friends, the kind who had known my father well, the ones who remembered his devotion to fairness. I asked if they would attend the memorial. "Of course," one said. "He was a good man. He'd be proud of you keeping his memory alive." Proud. That word caught in my chest. For the first time in years, I could almost hear my father's voice again, the calm certainty in it. At night, after Lily was asleep, I rehearsed what I would say, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. I didn't want to scream or humiliate. I wanted to reveal. I wanted truth to do the work for me. Meanwhile, Daniel grew suspicious of my newfound calm. He called one evening, his tone unusually soft. "He says you've been asking about the will." "I was just organizing some paperwork," I said, steady. "Nothing to worry about." He paused. "You're not planning anything, are you?" "Daniel," I said gently, "for once in your life, trust that I know what I'm doing." He laughed uneasily. "You sound like Mom." I said, "Maybe that's what makes this funny." And then I hung up. The night of the memorial arrived. The rain outside made everything shimmer under the streetlights. Clean, reflective, almost cinematic. My mother wore her favorite pearl necklace, the one she'd always said commanded respect. Daniel stood beside her, arm wrapped around his wife, both smiling for the arriving guests. I stayed near the back of the room, waiting, watching. When everyone had eaten, my mother stood to speak, graceful, rehearsed, as always. She thanked everyone for remembering the man who gave us everything. Daniel chimed in with a few stories, painting our family as the picture of unity. And then, when the applause softened, I rose. "Before we end tonight, I'd like to share something my father wrote before he passed, something about equality and legacy." I walked to the front, holding the original signed will in my hand, neatly sealed in a clear envelope. My mother's smile faltered just slightly, barely visible, but I saw it. Daniel shifted in his seat. I continued, "This is my father's final will, notarized and verified. It states clearly that both homes were to be divided equally between his children, not managed by one, not withheld by another, equally." A low murmur rippled through the guests. I turned to Mr. Bennet, who had agreed to attend in honor of the occasion. He stepped forward quietly and confirmed, "Yes, this is the legal document signed in my office 5 years ago." My mother's voice cut through the air. "Emma, what on earth are you doing? This is neither the time nor the place." "Maybe not for you, but it's long overdue for me." She tried to rise, but her hand trembled. "You're twisting things. You've always misunderstood." I looked at her, not with anger, but with profound calm. "No, Mom, I finally understand perfectly." I placed the will on the table beside the framed photo of my father, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating, until someone in the crowd whispered, "Good for her." My mother's eyes glistened with something between rage and fear. Daniel looked pale, lips pressed tight. The image they had so carefully couraged began to fracture. I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't crave chaos. I simply said, "Dad believed in fairness. I'm just giving his truth back to the room." Then I turned and walked away, slow, deliberate, the sound of rain meeting the quiet echo of my heels. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I sat in my car listening to the rain against the windshield and smiled faintly, not out of triumph, but peace. Justice had spoken, quietly, clearly, and without vengeance.
The next morning, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Some calls came from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Others came from family friends, stunned, apologetic, or quietly proud. But the most frequent calls came from my mother, and I didn't answer a single one. Revenge, I've learned, isn't about shouting, "I told you so." It's about silence that echoes louder than any explanation. By noon, my brother texted, "You didn't have to humiliate us like that." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "I didn't. The truth did." That single sentence became my anchor for the weeks that followed. Mr. Bennet filed the will officially. The law recognized it without dispute. The notarized document left no room for my mother's signature tricks. Overnight, the house Daniel had claimed as his reverted to a joint property. A legal error informed them both of the change. I didn't gloat. I didn't even call. Instead, I sent a brief, neutral message. "Dad's wishes are restored. I will take care of my share quietly. Please direct future correspondence through Mr. Bennet." Then I turned off my phone and went for a long walk with Lily. She held my hand, swinging it gently, her little voice breaking the calm, morning calm. "Mommy, are you happy now?" I paused, kneeling down to her level. "I'm peaceful, sweetheart. That's even better." News traveled faster than I expected. People who once whispered about Emma's overreaction now exchanged quiet nods of respect. My mother's image, the gracious matriarch who kept the family together, cracked overnight. Old friends stopped attending her luncheons. Her charity board asked her to step down temporarily, citing personal matters. And Daniel? Well, his real estate license renewal hit a snag when someone anonymously submitted evidence that he had used the same property to apply for a loan, a property he no longer legally owned. I never had to lift a finger. My only weapon had been truth presented with precision and patience. People often think revenge needs spectacle, that you have to burn bridges and scream your victory into the night. But real revenge, the kind that transforms you, feels like watching dawn break after years of darkness. Quiet, certain, unstoppable. Mr. Bennet smiled as he handed me a stack of finalized documents. "It's done. You now officially own your father's share." I signed the paper slowly, breathing in the weight of that sentence. He watched me thoughtfully. "You handled this with remarkable composure, Emma." I nodded. Anger never scared them, but silence? That terrifies people like my mother. He smiled faintly. "You might have inherited more of your father's wisdom than you think." That line lingered. A week later, I returned to my father's old garden, the one behind the house now half mine. The roses were overgrown, the benches faded, but the air felt familiar. Lily ran ahead, laughing as she tried to catch raindrops in her small hands. I knelt by my father's favorite spot, a worn wooden chair, and whispered, "It's done, Dad. Your truth came through." For the first time since that birthday party, the ache in my chest softened. Then came the final act, unplanned, poetic in its simplicity. My mother called again one evening. When I answered, her voice was trembling, not from rage this time, but fragility. "Emma, I don't know what you've done, but everyone is turning their backs on us. Daniel can't find work. People are gossiping. You've ruined us." I listened quietly. "No," I said gently. "I didn't ruin you. You did, the moment you decided your pride mattered more than your family." She began to cry softly, then whispered, "Please, don't let them see me like this." There was a pause, long enough to break something inside me. "Mom," I said, voice calm but firm, "the only person who can't bear to see you as you are is you." And I ended the call. That moment wasn't triumph. It wasn't even closure. It was acceptance. The quiet understanding that I no longer needed her approval, her permission, or her apology to exist. The revenge was complete not because they suffered, but because I stopped needing their validation to exist. Over the following months, I focused on rebuilding life. I renovated my share of the house, turning my father's study into a small workspace. Lily painted the walls a pale yellow, her favorite color. Every morning, we'd sit by the window with tea and sunlight spilling in, and I'd write. Not letters of anger, but notes of gratitude. Small reflections on how pain can purify. One of those notes read, "Revenge isn't destruction, it's reclamation of dignity, of silence, of self." By the time the next year's family gathering came around, I was living somewhere new. Not far, but far enough. My mother sent a card, just one sentence, written in shaky script. "I miss the sound of your voice." I placed it in a drawer, closed it gently, and smiled. Some debts, after all, are settled best by never reopening them.
Betrayal can feel like the end. It can make you question everything: yourself, the people around you, even the very definition of family. But here's the truth I've learned. Betrayal is never the final chapter. It is a pause, a challenge, a doorway. What the oppressor tries to write as the end of your story, the humiliation, the control, the pain, is only the beginning of your own comeback. I want anyone listening to hear this clearly. The way someone else treats you does not define your worth. It doesn't dictate your happiness, and it certainly doesn't determine your strength. Every act of injustice, every cruel word, every moment of being overlooked can become fuel. Fuel to reclaim dignity. Fuel to reclaim your story. Fuel to transform quiet suffering into undeniable power. Revenge, when done thoughtfully, is not about anger or chaos. It's about strategy. It's about waiting until the moment is right and using truth as your weapon. For me, revenge was the framework that allowed me to move through this betrayal with calm precision. It gave me clarity where there was once confusion. It gave me control where there had been helplessness. And in the process, it reminded me that my voice, my actions, and my choices are my own. Through this process, I discovered something I hadn't realized before. Power doesn't come from taking from others. Power comes from standing tall in the face of wrong, refusing to shrink, and asserting your right to exist fully, without fear or apology. It comes from saying, I will not let you define me. I will not let you control my story. And that's exactly what I did. Today, my life feels different. Every morning, I wake up knowing that I've reclaimed what was mine, not just legally, but emotionally. Lily laughs freely in our home, surrounded by the warmth and safety that she deserves. I walk through each day with a quiet confidence, carrying lessons from the past without letting them weigh me down. This is my story, not the story my mother or anyone else tried to dictate. It's a story of survival, of courage, and of reclaiming the power that betrayal tried to take from me. So, for anyone listening, your story isn't over. You can rise, you can fight, you can reclaim your peace and your dignity. The end isn't what others allow. It's what you choose to write for yourself. My name is Emma Clarke, and I turned betrayal into strength, humiliation into clarity, and silence into action. I came back from a place of pain and walked into a life where I hold the pen. And so can you. This was another story from Revenge Bible, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Subscribe and join us for the next transformation.